Good morning. I'm Ralph Sevenor. Today is January 24th, 2003. We're delighted to be here today on behalf of ARIF, which is a cooperative effort with the Central Station Alarm Association, the National Burglar and Fire Alarm Association, and the Security Industry Association. And today I have great pleasure in introducing an old friend, Al Janjigian. And Al has been one of the pioneers in the alarm industry from the distribution standpoint. And Albert has been around since 1970, and I again say that he has really revolutionized the industry. So, Al, I'm going to ask you a series of 7 questions, and as well as my partner here, Charlie Darsh, who's chairman of ARIF, and we'd like to hear your input on that.
Okay.
So, Charlie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Albert, we worked together back in 1973, and I guess I used you as my mentor back in those days, and you were both my mentor and my boss. I'm going to start with the first question here that was, how did you initially get involved in the security alarm business?
Well, actually, that's a pretty funny story. I was asked to help a friend evaluate some locks for his house, because he lived in a remote area, and realized that putting special locks on this house really wasn't going to help very much because it would just slow down someone who wanted to get in. So I suggested he put in a burglar alarm system. And his response was, "That's a great idea, go find me a burglar alarm system." Well, not knowing anything about electronics, I hooked up with my buddy Art Appel, who had recently gotten out of the Air Force. And Art found a system that we installed, which prompted us to think of this brilliant scheme to rent portable alarm systems to people going on vacation for short periods of time. Of course, we never found anything that worked to do that, but we did start doing installations briefly, and then drawing on some previous experience, got into the wholesale distribution business.
What year was that?
That was originally October of 1970, and we began distributing in January of '71. And then went completely to distribution within 3 months.
Why don't you tell us the name of the company?
Was Detectronics, and our claim to fame was the fact that we were the first national wholesale distribution company in the industry. Up to that time, dealer companies needed to buy their products direct from manufacturers, which often meant a 2 to 3 week delay, and we felt that was kind of onerous for people, and we began bringing in product lines, stocking them on the shelf locally, providing credit for dealers, which appeared to be unheard of in the business, providing immediate shipping so that if people called us by 7 p.m., they got their order shipped the same day, which meant from our base in New England, that meant anyone in New England was getting overnight deliveries, which was revolutionary. At the time, the average turnaround was 2 to 3 weeks, so this was really quite a thing for the business.
What was the next operation that you opened?
The first remote branch was Atlanta. Then we went to Glendale, California, and then Dallas, Texas. Eventually, we had 16 locations between the U.S. and Canada, and then 8 more in Europe. So it was quite a successful venture.
So, in essence, certainly the distribution that you had really has changed the face of the alarm industry in general, as far as the entrepreneur, as far as the smaller companies.
I think what really happened and what distribution enabled was the growth of small dealers all over the country. There was no easy way to acquire equipment for an entire system. If a dealer wanted to acquire equipment, they had to buy bells from one place often, control panels sometimes from another place if they didn't make them themselves. Remember, this is the period when people were still taking 2 relays, sticking them on a piece of masonite and stuffing them in a bell jar for environmental protection.
I see some up on the walls
Yeah,
here.
there are a few of those around here. And when it was considered a dirty word to put solid-state electronics in a control panel.
But roughly how many lines do you recall that you might have had at that time between the burg and fire industry?
I think within 6 months we probably had about 20 lines, but very quickly, within about 2 years, we were carrying more than 150 different product lines, and we had over 3,000 products in the line. So it was very, very rapid growth. And in those years, rapid growth meaning 100% growth per year, and sometimes more than that.
Can you explain then how the name changed from give us a little quick overview of how the name changed from Detectronics to Aerotech?
Well, what happened was that we wanted to grow the business and were unable to fund it ourselves, so we went looking for someone to partner with us, and that company turned out to be Aerospace Research or Advisor Security in Brighton, Mass. They acquired us in 1973. They themselves were acquired by ADT in 1975, who then went on to acquire a number of other businesses, including Electro Signal Lab, the smoke detector company down in Rockland. That was in '76. In 1978, all of these businesses, all of these acquisitions were consolidated under the name of Aerotech, and the business headquarters moved to Framingham, Mass.
That's 1977, August of 77.
Right.
Albert, if I could ask you, put your soothsaying suit on now. And what do you see in store, looking at your crystal ball, what do you see in store for the industry over the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I think some of what's going to happen will be a continuation of a trend that began several years ago, and that is we've got a number of very large companies, multinational companies, entering the industry. You know, in the last few years, we've seen Bosch come in. Siemens has acquired Cerberus, who already owned Landis and Gear, Pyrotronics, and a number of other companies here in the U.S. GE has now entered the business, acquiring Interlogix, which is the old Central company. That trend is probably going to continue. So this idea of consolidation, which really began through consolidation of dealer companies back when Ben Call really was probably one of the first who got caught in that whirlwind. And that trend of consolidation has really picked up steam, is now hitting the supply side, the manufacturer side. That's probably the biggest trend that will affect the industry. That's going to mean a number of very, very large companies, but probably fewer large companies that will control bigger and bigger parts of the industry. The other major shifts, again, continuing evolution that really started a long time ago. When you think about it, we started off as sort of an engineering and technical-based business. And I can remember the days when it was so important, how many zones does your control panel have? Well, I think we've moved away from this technical orientation. In the 80s, we started to see people were more concerned with marketing issues. And that's when mass marketing of residential systems came in, when Brinks started, really the first. ADT got involved, Westinghouse got involved, and the $99 or $200 residential systems, or even free residential systems, started to come up. Now I think we're moving from the marketing orientation to more of a service orientation. And I think what will come in the future is that there's going to be a major shift in the foundation of what is it that we do. Not getting away from a recurring revenue base, which really is the flywheel that I think drives the industry. But in terms of the outward face of the business itself, now we're going to be moving into the era of moving information. And that's certainly what you see in the commercial side, more and more with larger systems. The security system portion of a building management system in a large commercial environment increasingly has to interface with other systems already installed. So you'll find that the human resource director now has some influence over the acquisition of security systems, certainly the financial people, and clearly the MIS and computer people do, and a lot of that because there's a need to interface with their other systems already running.
Okay. Now, one of the things that we'd be curious to find out is you must have some anecdotal or some humorous story in your career, something that you could briefly give us a quick story about.
I don't know how quick, but the funniest thing I always remember about the business is not a story by itself, it's really a person, and Frank Ronchetti. Frank Ronchetti was, from the moment he woke up in the morning, was a joke. And, just a funny guy. But there's one story I always remember about Frank when he was managing the Aerotech distribution branch in Chicago. This branch had about a 25 or 30-foot long parts counter, and there was a dartboard on the wall at the end. And Frank, every once in a while, would come screaming out of his office and throw a dart at this dartboard. And one day, there was a dealer leaning on the counter buying some stuff, and Frank came screaming out of the office, and the guy turned to hear the scream, and the dart went through his earlobe. Now, that could normally be a real disaster, but Frank, in his inimitable fashion, ended up selling the guy about $10,000 worth of equipment and a Band-Aid.
And maiming him.
Relative to the alarm business, have you had anything that you might change? Is there anything that you would have done differently?
I don't think so. This industry has been so good to a lot of people, and I certainly will attest to that. I've enjoyed every bit of it. It's been an amazing sleigh ride the whole time. And what I think is really gratifying is to look around and see so many people who come to the industry from other places and end up staying. And the reason is it's magnetic. I think people have a difficult time extracting themselves from this business. It's
We all
really,
feel that way, don't we?
of course.
Albert, you've done so much for the industry. You've helped revolutionize the whole industry as a distribution portion and put a lot of companies in business, I might add, because of that. But you've done a lot for the industry in general. You certainly were president of SIA. You were in a lot of committees. And could you give me an overview of that?
Well, I was president of SIA technically 5 times, which was almost a funny story because the bylaws limited you to, I think, 2 terms. But the board consistently kept rewriting the bylaws because I think they couldn't get anyone else to take the job. That in itself was, for me, quite a wonderful experience, and allowed me to get involved with a lot of technical committees and also legislative committees. There were, at the time, of course, this was in the late 70s, early 80s, particularly, when there was quite a lot going on with respect to wireless systems and new legislative things that were going on Capitol Hill, and we got very involved as an association in some of that stuff. I worked on committees that were involved in access control activities, setting standards. The Digital Communicator Standards Committee came to be during my tenure as president of SIA, and that was probably the first industry-generated standard that we got to enjoy and led to the development of other standards later on, which I think actually helped grow the industry because it created essentially an open architecture environment.
Standardization.
That's right, and there weren't so many proprietary systems running around, which made it a Tower of Babel for communicating.
Actually, do you have any words of wisdom for our future generations out there of alarm professionals?
Well, I don't claim to be able to see into how people should run themselves or their businesses, but I guess if I said anything, I would say it's so important, and I think this room is a great example of this issue. I think it's so important for new people coming into the business to really try to understand the past, because understanding the past begins to explain why we do things as we do today. And sometimes the stuff we do looks very strange to an outsider. And you hear so many times with large new companies coming in, oh, we're going to show these people how to do it right. Well, we do things as we do for a reason, and the history of it will help explain that. And you really need to know the history in order to understand how to move into the future. And the caveat with that is not get so wrapped up in the history that you're not willing to break outside the box and think in new ways of doing things.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I've really enjoyed it, and if you see this, it means we've done our job at getting this going, but we have so much excitement, and I can't thank you enough for coming down and spending your years of expertise and helping us.
Well, very enjoyable.
So, any final thoughts?
No, just I think this is a great industry. People should enjoy it, and it's a place where you can have a lot of fun and do very well.
Great. Thank you.